We're gonna record?
Turn off. Hit that OK thing at the top so it doesn't interfere with you. Now you gotta do it on the EOC.
Oh, should be everything. All right, Steve, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out on this wonderful weather day. Appreciate the turnout. I'm actually surprised to see this many people here for this talk. Yeah. Well, we didn't have any Helnados, so Rebecca's here, so I think we're good. All right, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mike Alderis, call sign KJ5AJU. And this month we're doing a talk, an intro to amateur radio satellite communications. You're recording? Yes, Paul's re-recording. Primary focus on this one's going to be FM satellites. I do cover the linear birds, but I don't personally have equipment to work linear yet, so I can't speak to that.
Sorry.
You're recording again? Okay. We good? So real quick, common forms of amateur communication: VHF, UHF, HF, digital. All three of those, I'm sure most of us have worked with. Not a lot of us have worked with the satellites themselves. Recap VHF, UHF. We've got CW, digital, FM communications, single sideband, and of course working with repeaters, and then simplex as well. HF, for those of us that have worked with it, there's CW, some digital there, FM, SSB. There are some HF repeaters available as well. And then digital modes, DMR, system Yaesu, system fusion. I've got that in there backwards. And D-Star, FT4 and FT8, RSC, which we have a talk coming up on in a couple of months. Although that may be more GSA call now. I'm not sure where we're at on that. Of course, GSA call. And then WinLink as well. Satellites. There are multiple sizes and types of satellites. Small satellites include the CubeSats, which are 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters, or 4 inches cubed. Really tiny little satellite. There are a couple of birds up there that are running on CubeSats. So you're trying to bounce your signal off something yay big, flying through space way up there and trying to hit it to be able to communicate with it. The original Oscar, which is the orbiting satellite carrying amateur radio, the first Oscar that was launched, weighed 22 pounds and was 15 by 25 by 33 centimeters or 6 by 10 by 13. So we're talking something a little bit bigger. But once again, you're trying to hit this way up there. Oscar 10, which was about the middle of the series when it launched, was 198 pounds, was 1.3 meters by 2 by 2 or 53 inches by 78 by 78. So we're talking something much bigger target to try to hit. And then, of course, the International Space Station, which is 109 meters by 74 meters. It actually has an FM repeater on it you can work. And certain times of the month and on certain days, you can actually talk to the astronauts on the ISS. So we've got all kinds of little things up there flying around, small, bigger, all the way up to the size of the ISS that we can interface with. Okay, Tech Talk in a few months will be on VARC and WinLink. All right. So what can we do with the satellites that are floating in space? Well, easily we can use them with a decent sized home antenna to be able to access the weather satellites and get real-time weather imaging. The FM satellites, typical uplink on an FM satellite is around 145 megahertz with a downlink of 436.800 with plus or minus 9 kilohertz for the Doppler shift. The FM satellites use an arming CTCSS tone to activate the transponder. These satellites are up there floating around in space. Majority of them are solar powered, but you don't want to kill the batteries in them by them always listening. So if there hasn't been activity on the FM satellites, they typically go to sleep after 10 minutes. So if it hasn't been used in the last 10 minutes, you have to send an arming tone to tell the transponder to wake up to be able to work the satellite. They have a separate CTCSS tone for actually doing the QSOs, typically around 67 hertz. They function just like a repeater we have here on Earth. Whoever's got the strongest signal is going to win. And you can only typically have one person at a time doing a QSO on there. FM satellite frequencies, there's a list. I will put out we will be posting the slideshow so you can get to the links later, and I'll give you my email address if you want them separate. On the linear satellites, the transponders provide a wider bandwidth, somewhere between 20 and 50 kilohertz. It's a lot like working HF. They could support SSB and CW communication, allowing for multiple simultaneous QSOs at a time. Uplinks are typically on lower sideband. Downlinks are typically upper sideband. Longer QSOs allow for rag chewing type communication, although matter of minutes in length versus what we could do now on standard HF. Because these satellites are flying overhead, and they're only in sight of you being able to work them for a certain amount of time, depending on what their path is at that time. And then I have a link for the linear satellite frequencies as well. Like I said, I can provide those later. There's also APRS repeaters in space. So if you're APRS beaconing and there's a bird overhead, you could very well be bouncing off of that versus a terrestrial APRS station. Requirements for working with satellites. What do you need to know to make this all work? Slideshow. All right, real quick, we need to go over some vocabulary in regards to satellites. Azimuth is going to be the direction of a celestial object from the observer, expressed as the angular distance from the north or south point of the horizon to the point at which a vertical circle passing through the object intersects the horizon. Elevation angle. The elevation angle is the angle between a horizontal line or your observed horizon and a line of sight to an object above that horizon. It essentially measures how high an object appears in the sky or above a horizontal line. So when you're working a satellite, a lot of times they will start off outside of your elevation. Typically, when I've been trying to work satellites, I don't start hearing a bird till about 8 to 10 degrees above the horizon. When the bird comes into where you can hear it, that's considered the acquisition of signal. And when the bird goes out of where you can hear it, it's the LOS or loss of signal. And you only have time to work it while it's in your area. Sometimes a pass will be no higher than 10 degrees off the horizon. So you're working it real low. Sometimes that same object on a different day, different time, could be flying right overhead. The higher it is over you, the longer you have to work it. The lower it is, the less time you have to work it. Doppler effect, also known as the Doppler shift, is the change in frequency of a wave in relation to an observer who is moving relative to the source of the wave. You're stationary, but the satellite's moving. So you have to sit there and adjust your VFO to account for the Doppler effect as it transitions over the sky above you. And then it's supposed to be Keplerian data, also known as satellite orbital elements or two-line elements. It's a set of 6 input independent constants that define the shape, orientation, and position of an orbit. Basically, it's what tells you where the satellite is right now and where it's traversing in the sky. Elements are named after Johannes Kepler, the first describe the laws of planetary motion. So to work satellites, you need a receiver if you just want to listen, or a transceiver if you want to actually communicate with them. For listen only, you only need a simple VHF UHF receiver. To communicate using an FM or linear satellite, you'll need a transceiver capable of VHF UHF for the FM birds, or 2-meter single sideband for working the linear satellites. In most cases, a transceiver capable of dual watch so you can listen while you're transmitting, making it easier to determine if you're getting into the satellite. You'll know if you're actually making it into the satellite if you can listen at the same time and hear yourself come back in the downlink frequency. So if you only have a radio capable of a single watch, having a second radio that you can put on the downlink will come in handy. So as I said, you can listen and see if you're actually making it in to the satellite by hearing yourself when it comes back. Antennas, there are multiple forms of antennas you can use working with satellites. Simple VHF, UHF Yagi, like the arrow behind me, log periodic, or even a set of egg beaters we have here, are just examples of what you can use. I'll go into antennas a little more in depth in a bit. And then you would have to know the current kept data for the satellite and your GPS coordinates where you're operating from. You need to know where the bird is in the sky in relation to where you are at that time. There are several cell phone applications that you can load on your phone that will help you with this. And they will also allow you to be able to tell by positioning your cell phone where the bird is on azimuth and elevation by the way you have your cell phone angle. And I have a list of those as well here at the end. Recording device. A definite must in my mind when you're working with satellites. Satellite communication happens fast. Typical QSO time is a matter of seconds when you're working the FM satellites. You're working a moving object that could have a pass above the horizon that lasts a few minutes to upwards of 10, depending on the azimuth and elevation of the pass. I find you don't typically have time to sit there with a logbook while you're trying to work the radio and work somebody and log the information. So having a way of recording your QSOs, either video with your cell phone or audio, like with a digital recorder, will allow you to go back after the pass and record your logs. Having a way to attach the recorder to your transceiver is a bonus because then you can get clear recordings of who you're having the QSO with. A lot of times when you go back and listen to the recordings, if you have this open air and you don't have it close enough to the radio, you may not be able to make out that call sign you worked. Whereas if you have a way of interfacing it with the radio, you'll have both sides on there and be able to have that. You can even work satellites on a receiving side. I'm sure you can do it with SDRs capable of transmitting as well. Some SDR hardware and software. Those who've worked with SDRs, you've got the NOLX, you've got the RTL SDRs, which are $40 on Amazon with a set of antennas. And you've got the SDR Play models. For software, a couple of SDR applications you can use are SDR++. AirSpy puts out a program called SDR Sharp. You can use those to tune to the frequency for what you want to listen to on the downlink. If you're just listening to QSOs, you don't need any kind of decoding. If you're working things like the NOAA weather satellites, when you're listening to the satellite, it comes down as a series of audio tones. So you have to have a way to translate those audio tones into something usable. So for the weather satellites, you can use applications like WX to image or NOAA APT. You can pipe both of those as plugins into the SDR software and be able to decode the images. You can also do SSTV decoding off the satellites as well with MMSTV, SSTV, or YONIQ. The ISS does at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. They'll do a contest where they transmit images via SSTV from the International Space Station. And you try to decode as many of those as you can during the window for when they do it. And you can submit them for for QSL cards, and what else do they do, Steve? Awards? Certificates. And isn't typically the more you get, the better the certificate is? Or is it just you get a cert for just okay? A new application that's made it onto the market. I say market. It's a free application. It's called SatDump. I've used it just a little, and it has decoding for multiple satellites and formats built into it. So not just being able to do the SSTV or the weather satellite decoding, it listens to pretty much every type of bird that's in the air. And if they've come up with a decoding algorithm for it, you can do it. You can actually decode military weather satellites with SatDump. It has the decoding built into it. And surprisingly, when the military weather satellites are over the US, they turn off encryption. So they're wide open for you to be able to get the data from them. Now, it's only satellite images regarding weather, but it is available to you. Am I going too fast? Any questions? I can't tell because I'm looking at a room with dark. One thing that comes in handy for FM satellite operation is the OpenGD77 firmware. It's an open source firmware for Radioddity GD77s or GD77 chipset based radios, including the Baofeng RD5R, the MD9600, MD2017, MD-UB380, a couple other models up there, and their clones. Retevis and Radioddity have done clones of a lot of these radios, and the firmware, because it's still using that GD77 chip, can also be used on those clones. It has support for DMR, but to me, the biggest selling point for it has built-in FM satellite capabilities. It can track the overhead satellite data based on time and location via updating the kept data on the radio. So you download the latest kept data to the radio. You put in if you have a radio that has GPS built in, it'll grab your coordinates. If not, you can manually input your lat long in the radio. And it'll give you a circular screen showing you of the bird overhead, where it sits in azimuth, as well as the elevation as it passes overhead. And the biggest selling point for me is the fact that it'll automatically do all the Doppler shift calculations for you in real time. It also has the arming and the QSO CTCSS codes built into it. So once the satellite's armed, all you have to do is pick up the radio and talk. It automatically adjusts for Doppler shift. So you're not having to sit there with the VFO and try to tune it as you go through the pass. You just keep keying up, and then it also adjusts the Doppler shift on the downside, on the downlinks. So all you have to do is key and listen, key and listen. You're not having to do any of the complex calculations or adjustments while you're using it. It only works for the FM waves. There's no GD77 based radios that have single sideband built into them. But getting started into working the satellites, like I said, FM's where I'm at right now, and it comes in real handy to do that.
How does it interface to the radios? Is it like on a CAT interface, similar to the other radios have?
What, the OpenGD77?
Yeah.
It's actually it loads directly into the radio. There's no CAT interface for it. You can't use it for doing automatic operations. It's going to be PTT.
Thank you.
That answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. And I do have some radios with GD77 I can pass around at the end if you want to see what it looks like. Antennas for working satellites. The antennas on the satellites themselves are typically right-hand circular polarized. It reduces the sensitivity to the satellite's orientation. Satellites aren't sitting nice and flat as they're going through space. They're tumbling. So as they're tumbling, that antenna is coming in and out of view. So you're sitting here trying to work it, and you're also trying to take into account the fact that because it's tumbling, the antenna may be right at you during part of the pass, and it's nice and loud. And because of the rotation of the satellite, it may be turned away from you and it may fade on while you're working. They have an omnidirectional radiation pattern, which helps reduce the blind spots and nulls in the signal, but it doesn't totally eliminate them. And they're robust in harsh environments. They handle the challenges of space, including signal interference from other things, as well as multipathing effects that can happen. Antennas for working the satellites. Any antenna capable of 2 meter and 70 centimeter communications can be used to work satellites. You can work a satellite with a long antenna or a rubber duck with a mono, not with a mono band, with any kind of vertical. Dual band Yagis, ones that are commonly used. You have 2 meter or the long beams, 70 centimeters are the short. You've got your driven element, you've got your reflector, then you got a series of directors. When you're working a satellite, basically you're going to be pointing it into it. But because the satellites are tumbling, like I say, you have that issue with them going in and out on nulls. And your Yagi is either going to be vertically or horizontally polarized, depending on which way the elements are going. A lot of people will work them by hand, and you'll see them in videos where they're sitting there twisting and swerving and everything else. It's to try to keep in orientation with the object that's tumbling. I find that a tripod that gives you the option of being able to turn, for me, is a lot easier, just because I'm not sitting there trying to hold the weight of the antenna. You may find that, using just the Yagi without it will work just as fine for you.
Very good question.
Mm-hmm.
There's any circular polarized antennas on the market
There are.
for this application.
There are some. I've also seen custom builds where they'll do a vertically and horizontally polarized 70 centimeter as one antenna, and then do the same with the 2 meter, and then using a phasing harness to be able to turn them into a circular polarized type setup. It's really the only one I can think of at the moment. Do you know of anything else, Greg?
I have a Cushcraft antenna that it's 2 different beams for the UHF and VHF, and you can switch it where it's right hand polarized or left hand polarized, all in one antenna. I guess historically a lot of the linear satellites would do that in the past. I mean, that's the first antenna I was given for satellites in the 80s was a corkscrew.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't ever quite get any satellite contacts on it, but that
Right.
was,
Right. I don't know.
I think with the FMs is a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Working with the FMs is a whole lot easier. I haven't run across any commercially available. There are tons of DIY out there on how to build your own. But like I said, I haven't seen anything real commercially available.
I don't know if that Cushcraft antenna is still available or not. I mean, that company was, I guess, absorbed by MFJ, and
Right, which is no longer.
I know their warehouse was in New Hampshire.
Other option for antenna, a lot of people use for satellites is a log periodic. Obviously, a lot smaller, a little easier to do in the hand. And then, of course, you've got egg beaters like these, with VHF and UHF elements.
Those are actually made by a company called M Squared. I think they're still readily available.
And there are tons of DIYs online for those as well. Depends on what kind of ham you are. Are you the kind of ham that likes to get their hands dirty and build and play with things, or the kind who wants to just go out and buy something and make it work? Like I said, there are plenty of DIYs, even for the Arrow antennas. There's DIYs out there to build your own. I wasn't that adventurous with this one. This one I actually bought from Arrow. Real quick anatomy of an FM QSO. What exactly do you say during a QSO? First thing you need to do is listen to the downlink frequency and see if the satellite is currently active. See if you hear anybody on it at all. If active, you should be hearing stations calling their call sign and their grid square. Respond to a specific station with giving the sender's call sign plus your call sign plus your grid square, and wait for them to do the same to confirm contact. Once they, when they confirm the contact, they'll call you back. They'll give their call sign, they'll call you back, and then what grid square they're in. That's it. It's a real quick, fast, down and dirty QSO. Because like I said, you're trying to work an object that's in the sky for a limited amount of time, and you're trying to work it with everybody else that's trying to work it. So on the FM bird, you're not going to sit there and have a 5-minute rag choose that goes through on its pass. If it's inactive, you hear no activity on it whatsoever, you have to arm the satellite by sending the arming CTCSS code on the uplink frequency. And then start calling your call sign and grid square and waiting for a response. Remember that just because you can hear someone on the downlink doesn't mean that they can hear you. The fact that you can hear a satellite means you have your equipment set up at least halfway correctly. Having a way to monitor the downlink ensures your equipment is set up correctly both ways. You can, like I said, listen to yourself as you're calling CQ. Variances in other stations could be the limiting factor. You may have your rig set up completely correct. You hear all kinds of people calling. You may be calling back to them and not have a QSO at all. But as I said, the problem may not be your equipment. It could be on the other side.
Question.
Yes.
The arming, is there any delay on that? By the time you set the arming code, is it automatically active?
It's supposed to automatically turn the transponder on. So if the bird heard you, it's good to go as soon as it receives the arming code.
Okay.
Another question about arming, is there, I may have missed what you were saying, is there any, if you were simultaneously, you're monitoring the output, is there any acknowledgement?
No. No, there's typically not a response per se. You don't get a courtesy tone or anything like that to let you know that it has armed successfully. Thank you. So here's a image of a satellite on its pass. The yellow ring is the footprint of the satellite during its pass at that time. You could be all the way down here on the edge of it, and you're barely hearing the bird at maybe 5 or 10 degrees, whereas somebody else that's working the exact same satellite could be completely under it. So objects up here, curve of the earth, you're way down here, he's right here. So you're trying to do a bounce off of it and back down. So depending on where you're at in the pass may also limit your ability to make contacts. If it's a real low horizon pass for where you're at that time, you could hear tons of people out there communicating and not get a response because they may not be able to hear you. You're at the right angle to receive from the satellite, but not necessarily to get into the satellite.
What happens up?
That is actually just an image I found online. That's Mac Doppler. Satellite tracking, there are several different websites. I got some to show you here in a second. Where you can go and see real-time tracking and whatnot with the different satellites. As I said, there's some apps for your phone. And then it's no scope. I've got an image here in a second. This is the AMSAT Live Oscar satellite status page. This is a crowdsourced status page. They have all of the Oscar satellites that you can work on this page, and they request that people, when they work a satellite, to submit their capabilities of being able to reach that satellite on a given day. So here, let's say this is satellite 80123. April 19th, they had a total of 8 successful QSOs during the day on that satellite. So looking at this, you can tell Typically, if a satellite is functional or non-functional, based upon crowdsource information, it'll help you determine which birds you want to try to focus on working as they come overhead versus just trying to work every bird that comes over. The satellites are there regardless. You know, if you go and see, oh, I've got, let's see, oops. Pick another one on here that had some info. AO91, this one right here that's got a yellow, bunch of yellow and reds. Hey, it's going to pass me a day. It's going to pass me 3 times. But the last 5 days, nobody's hit it successfully. Do I want to waste my time trying to hit it, or do I want to try to find another bird that I know people have hit recently?
The yellows and reds are misses.
Our yellows and reds are misses or not real good communication into the satellite. There are times where the downlink is working and the uplink isn't necessarily working, or vice versa. So it's a way of being able to tell what's going on. Now, on other satellites down here, like IO86, in the last 5 days, there's only been 1 QSO on it. Not for lack of trying, it's just nobody's been able to use it. So that whole line is empty. I don't know if it's empty because nobody tried to use it or if nobody could reach it. So since you have limited time working these things, and the passes are 24/7, you may have a bird you really want to work, but it's not going to come through till 3 a.m. in the morning. You got to set your clock and everything by that as well if you want to be able to use it.
What is the typical hour that you would use to communicate with this?
You can talk to satellites with a 5-watt handheld.
Right, but typically people use as much power as they can, or do they try to use basically QRP?
To have QRP, typically 20 watts or less is what people typically use with them. I mean, you can drive it as hard as you want, but it's not really gonna benefit you much. Unlike here terrestrial on Earth, where you have to have really good, all this is based on line of sight. Let me just say that. Here, you may have to have higher power because you have a lot more obstruction between you and what repeater you're trying to reach. When you're dealing with satellites, it's the open sky. So you can use a lot less power and be heard a lot further because the satellite is so high up. As long as you don't have anything blocking your line of sight. And typically issues with line of sight are going to be on the low horizon passes because you're dealing with everything terrestrial you're trying to get through to hit a satellite that's barely coming up 5 or 10 degrees on the horizon versus something that passes overhead. A straight overhead pass, you can hit a satellite with 1 watt. As long as you have a good antenna on it. So it doesn't take much.
Here's one other thing that I think I remember from the linear transponder satellites. You were encouraged to use as little power as possible because there's multiple QSOs going there, and one
You don't
guy's
wanna overheat
hitting
it.
One guy's hitting it with a 500 watts. He's taking away from all the others. And problems occur.
Yeah, that was kind of my question.
Yeah.
And so with 1,000 watts, so they could be they could sort of own it.
Yeah, they could. They could. I mean, when working with the FMs, it's just like working a repeater. Whoever it hears the strongest is the one who's going to own it for that time
He who
period.
has the strongest signal wins the game.
Right. But you don't need a whole lot of power to have that good signal. So typically, from what I'm seeing working with the FMs, everybody recommends 10 watts or less to give everybody a chance because how short the passes are.
I think I remember in my reading years ago, the more power you use on a linear bird, the more you start the power budget of that bird.
I'm pretty sure the same goes with the FMs.
The hotter you hit it, the more power it's transmitting down there.
These are orbiting objects. They go in and out of the Earth. They have dark cycles, they have light cycles as far as when they're being able to reach the sun. They all have solar panels on them. They all have batteries. They're only charging when they're not on the dark side. Or they're not, faced away from the sun. So, as Steve said, you can power starve one real quick if you're hitting it too hot. and it doesn't have a chance to recharge. So there are times when the satellite's going operational for the simple fact that the battery's gotten so drained that the transponder can't activate. But you may find a week later that same satellite you couldn't work last week works just fine. Some helpful links. DX Engineering has a whole playlist on satellite operations with KX9X, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray. Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray also has his own YouTube channel. That DX Engineering playlist is on YouTube as well. KX9X is one of the operators I follow on YouTube. He does a lot of satellite roving. You will find people who are trying to get all of their grid squares will watch for satellite operators who are going to be roving, and a lot of the rovers will post when they're going to be in a grid square, especially if it's one that there isn't a whole lot of activity out of. Being a rover in a highly sought grid square makes you a very popular person, but you can also get totally piled up on while you're trying to operate that. But he goes out and does a lot of roving in those really rare type grid squares. AMSAT UK, I wish I could say the same for the US AMSAT website, but the AMSAT UK satellite tracking data, their website has just about everything you need when it comes to tracking. Which screens here? AMSATUK.org beginners satellite tracker. They have online orbital predictions. They have the free PC satellite tracking applications you can download. They have a list of applications available for iOS as well as Android phones. Let's see here. They have the link to the NORAD CAP data. I find myself using this one a lot because it's just a good resource for finding all this information. AMSAT.org themselves have a list of satellite frequencies for the FM birds as well as the linears. The thing I like about these websites is you find your satellite. Let's see here. Let's say I want to work Lilac Sat 2. It gives me the uplink frequency, the downlink frequency, and if it had any arming tones, the information will be here as well. I'd also tell you what the current known status of the satellite is. Like this one, the FM transponder is currently not on, but the telemetry beacon is still working on it. Let me see if I can find one of so here, the ISS crossband repeater. The uplink tone, the uplink frequency, the downlink frequency, and then this right here is the arming tone. Then they have the same thing going on the linear birds. They will give you the uplink and the downlink. The linear birds could do either lower or upper sideband for the uplink as well as the downlink. So you really need to figure out what satellite you want to work and then go pull the stats on it to see. Some birds, it's lower sideband going up, upper sideband coming down. Other birds, it's the other way. When working the FM satellites, it's typically 2 meter up, 440 down, but there are some FM birds that are 440 up and 2 meter down. And then the International Space Station itself, amateur radio on the International Space Station has their own website. This is the ariss.org site. They have all the information there on when they're doing their SSTV contests, as well as when the satellites, when the astronauts themselves are going to be on the repeater, so you can communicate directly with the astronauts. I have not managed to be on when the astronauts are actually at the helm on the radio. Those passes typically happen while I'm sound asleep. Another good site is N2YO. This will show you the current pass of a given satellite. Right now, I have it tracked in on ISS, but it'll give you the trajectory and where it'll come through in relation to you. The red dot is actually our grid square, or at least mine, Echo Mike 12. And then it used to have an option on here. I'm not sure if it's working at the moment, where you could click and see what birds are over my head at this time. Not find a link at the moment. But in this site, you can actually go in and choose what date you're planning on trying to operate a given satellite, and it'll give you the projected passes for that date and time as well. Yep, that's the end of the show. Let's see, a couple other websites. Audio on real quick. Recording here, somebody doing an FM QSO. Want to look for you guys. Yeah.
Progress.
All right, you guys can hear that or not?
Mike 0 November Papa Tango Portugal 59 Italy Oscar 9 2 Kilo X-ray. 73 Mike 0 November Papa Tango Portugal Joseph. 59 Italy Oscar 9 2 Kilo X-ray 73.
That was three QSOs.
Kind of like signal reports, they were also exchanged.
Yeah, some people will exchange signal reports, others will just do. Others will just do call sign and grid square. It really depends on what. Really depends on the operator. The big thing you're going for when you're doing the QSOs is figuring out what grid square they're in. The signal report, although great, is kind of a moot point because, like I said, there's so many different variables that are going on here. Hey, Grant, I got 590U. I mean, kind of. So what? I mean, you heard me. That's the important thing. That's really what you're going for when you're working. Because your signal quality is going to be really strong in part of the pass and then degrade on other parts of the pass without you doing anything to your equipment.
The CWQSO the same.
CWQSO is the same. So they're just calling your call sign and the grid square and then waiting for a response and call sign and grid square. Now the linear birds, which is something I really want to get into and I
I
haven't.
I don't know, can you do the CW on FM birds?
Oh, good point. No, you cannot do
I mean, I know it's very popular on the linear transponder ones where you have a
or you have room to work.
certain bandwidth, there'd be multiple QSOs
Right.
actually going on.
Yeah, on the FM, I don't know that you would. I've never heard any
Unless
CW on the
you're just transmitting tones through your microphone.
right.
something like that.
So that's all I've got for slides. Radios. Okay. So this has OpenGD 77 on it.
Michael,
Yes.
for our deal, if you want to stop share and move
Yeah.
closer to the camera, we'll be able to see that.
Yeah, no, yeah, good point. There's my radio. Decided it's not working. Okay, it already did the predictions. So this is a list of, yeah, it's not going to come in real clear. List of the satellites that could potentially be overhead and when they're going to pass. Grab one. How well that's going to show.
Yeah, I guess that kept data stuff changes though, so you really have to keep.
You really have to keep it updated. With OpenGD 77, it's got a kept data uploader built into it. All you have to do is hook up your radio and hit upload. When I'm working them, I typically will upload day of, if not the day before, just depending on where I'm going to be.
And
When I'm trying to work.
What duration does it cover? A few days, a week?
Typically the download is 72 hours. Yeah, it's not. It's not a whole lot of time in the grand scheme of things. There we go. It's a pretty good. Can't really see the dot. The dot is up here. So this is going to be the azimuth. Up here is going to be due north, or the top of the crosshairs. So north, east, southwest. So it's going to come into the horizon from the north. It's going to come in at 358 degrees. So almost due north. And then if I can get the line to show, it's probably gonna be better for me just to come around with the radio. So it'll show the azimuth 358 degrees. We'll show it on the crosshairs, and then the curved line that's coming through, it's gonna be the pass. So it'll let you know where it's gonna go through and what the elevation of the satellite is at that time.
Julie, turn the lights back on.
If this was an active pass, that dot would be moving. And the elevation and the azimuth would be changing on the screen. Those numbers would change as well.
Now, is the bullseye like directly overhead?
Yeah, the bullseye would be directly overhead.
Okay.
Bullseye would be directly
That
overhead.
is a really interesting little aspect. I didn't show others.
God would be the satellite itself. And as the pass was happening, God would be moving along that line. And automatically you tell you know they have that. The azimuth is going over. And then while it's going over, if you were to key, you would automatically adjust, as I said, you automatically do the Doppler shifting for you. So all you have to do is key up, talk, and unkey and just listen to it.
Because you said that's a reason to put that software on there, all by itself.
All by itself.
Yeah.
It has a whole DMR component for me that way to win on it.
Good. Thank you.
Need to show you how to use it on yours.
That's what I'm hoping you will.
Yeah, Julie has taken the leap to the dark side. I already have OpenGD on her radio. I need to show her how to actually use it. Like I said, it's great because all you have to do is key.
Question.
Yes.
So with the got two radios,
Mhm.
we need to use something like a bandpass filter on the second radio for the channel.
It depends on the radios. If you're working FMs with HTs, I've done a dual HT before. I haven't had a whole lot of issue with descents. As a matter of fact, this mount.
I mean, you're a couple hundred megahertz away, so.
Yeah. So I actually added a dual mount here to be able to put two radios on it when working with the HTs. You can do it with a single HT. If it doesn't have dual watch or two VFOs on it, you're guessing whether or not you're working, but you could do it with a single HT and use a duplexer and run it both directly into your HT. If you have something with dual watch, once again, duplexer would work.
I know some of the older mobile radios would actually do crossband repeat in them and enough separation to do that. I wonder how that would apply to.
Right. I'm actually moving into getting away from the HT realm. One of the guys I follow on YouTube has started doing it with an ICOM 2730. So I'm moving into doing a mobile rig. This is what I'm actually going to try to use in this year for field day.
Which ICOM radio?
2730. 2730A, it's a mobile.
Yeah.
2 meter, 70 centimeter, has two VFOs in it. And the way he set his up is he's got multiple satellites set up as channels in a zone on his radio. He's got the center frequency set up, and then he's got, I think it's a 500 hertz, might be 500 kilohertz difference. He's got 3 steps going either way from center frequency. Programmed his channels already into his radio. So all he has to do is spin the channel knob up or down on either VFO to be able to work the satellites.
And it will lock together.
Mhm.
That's interesting. So I guess it would be able to deal with Doppler then.
To be able to deal with Doppler because of that shifting, he's got pre-programmed as a channel on the radio. So he's just changing the channel via the knob. Because this has dual VFOs, I could go strictly into VFO mode and just try to spin, just stay on frequency directly myself if I wanted to. But I like the setup he's got, and he's having quite a bit of success using it. So I'm going to try that this year for field day. When you're working the linear birds on a single antenna setup like this, instead of using a duplexer, you would want to use a diplexer to keep from overloading the front end on the second radio. If you're using 2 radios for doing the SSB. If you're fortunate enough to have a radio that does 2 meter sideband, that has 2 tuners in it, then you wouldn't have to. But if you're working multiple radios, with the HTs, I haven't found it to be a problem with descents. But on the FMs, you probably would. Or with the mobiles, I mean, just because you're putting out more power.
Like, as a rule, you don't want to put out more power.
No, as a rule, you don't want to put out any more power than you have to. And because you're working an object that you should have clear line of sight to, you don't need a whole lot of power.
Kilowatt, yeah. It's low.
Yeah.
Kilowatt.
And KA9SUU kilowatted the satellite and it never works again.
More than overloading that front end.
Right.
So if you're not using one of those HT,
Mhm.
periodically valving that you run that software, what software are you turning to?
So at that point, you'd be going to something like a cell phone app. For the azimuth and the elevation and the frequencies. We pull up the one I've got
So
on here.
is the frequency manipulation, you can successfully do that manually?
If you have a radio that you have the ability to manually tune the frequency. Yes, you can. But doing something like, the more variables you put into what you have to do while you're trying to complete this really quick QSO, the harder it's going to be to complete that QSO. So you can do it without something like OpenGD 77, but OpenGD 77 kills a lot of the variables. So all you need to focus on is pointing it, and keying up and listening. There are, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, there are software packages available for desktops that you can connect to your radio if it has any kind of ring control in it. It will actually do the tuning for you. You can take it one step further, and there are packages available that if you're using a rotor, will automatically, do the rotation for you as well. You can spend money and just sit back, and all you ever have to do is key. They have got rotors that will do your azimuth, and they've also got rotors that will do elevation. They got rotors that will do both.
That's kind of one of the. Somebody's asking a question. I was gonna say, that's kind of one of the advantages of using an egg beater is, it's super omnidirectional. But then again, you're not gonna be able to track anything with it.
No.
And
No, unless you're putting on some sort of
not
mount.
get in and not pile up very well.
Right. What were you saying, Steve? What'd you say?
He's talking.
Yeah, you're
I
not-
was in the car switching over. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Use it right now.
Yeah. There is actually an open source DIY build project, and I
It's
will
muted.
drop it in build projects on Discord. Designed by a ham. It is ESP32 based. And you can upload the kept data to it, and it'll automatically control an
Showing
azimuth
it here, but it is muted.
And yeah, but you should be hearing me through the mic on the camera. It was built by ham. It's ESP32 based. There's links to get all the equipment. It's about a $200 build.
That's expensive.
Huh?
That's not bad.
That's not bad. That's
For
not bad.
satellite, that's really awesome.
And you can mount it on a tripod. You can mount it on a tower. You can mount it wherever you want to mount it. And it will do the elevation as well as the azimuth tracking that satellite as it's coming through its pass. Another thing I forgot to mention, and I'm hoping to have in by field day. I've been waiting 6 weeks for the thing. An LNA. You've been playing with LNAs with your SDR stuff.
Yeah.
An LNA comes in really handy when dealing with satellites. Low noise amplifier. One of the guys that I follow, the one I'm following, and I do not have his YouTube page. You should have put that more links. The guy I'm following who's doing this with the 2730 got himself an LNA to use with it. I actually ordered the same LNA.
Which brand?
Got it from HRO.
Really?
Yeah. It's coming in from Europe though. That's just why I've been waiting so dang long for the thing.
Germany by any chance?
Could be. While I'm pulling that up. CSSB version. It is coming from it's the same manufacturer. This is there's no name on it. Anyway, adding the amplifier, he was able to go from working satellites at 15 degrees or higher in elevation to being able to start to hear them at 2 degrees.
Right when they popped over the horizon.
Right when they popped over. It wasn't necessarily able to work them yet, but was able to hear them.
Oh, I mean, you're adding 20 dB to that link.
Exactly.
Very helpful.
Exactly. Which would help you real quickly determine what satellites you want to work or not. If you're waiting for something to come up to a 15-degree elevation, that's a whole lot of window. You don't know if that bird's there or not, that you could have logged onto something else that was there. So having something like the amplifier to be able to at least require them lower in horizon will let you know whether or not that's an active bird You know, I'm not hearing it by 5 degrees, but I got a really good LNA on it. Okay, let me find another satellite and try to work right now.
Which tracking software do you have the best luck with? You know, PC based, phone based,
Up to now, honestly,
caps.
it's either been OpenGD or on the cell phone, it is. Which is the one I've been using lately? SatTrack. SatTrack, SatTrack. I know it's on iOS. I think it's on Android. And Sputnik have been the two I've had the best luck with. SPUTNIK with an exclamation.
Have you ever tried Orbitron?
I have not. You know, just like every other thing in the world, there are, you know, hundreds of different apps, but which ones actually work or not. These two have worked well for me. I haven't heard of that one. Doesn't mean it, you know, it's not a good app. I have no familiarity with it whatsoever.
We use ISS detector on Android
Mhm.
to actually go watch the ISS go over, and it'll track all kinds of other stuff.
I got access to do other birds other than the ISS.
Pardon?
It does other satellites or other objects
Yeah,
other
you
than
can
ISS.
configure it for what objects you want to look for in the sky and stuff. But the kids love it when we take them out and
Now, if you want to
show them
see,
the ISS going over, but it, you can use the phone and you point it, line up the bubble on there and point the phone at the object in the sky.
Also, if you're using, you used to do it.
yeah, SatTrack's the one. SatTrack's really good about that. You point it in the right direction.
But most of the time you can see the space station go over at night
Right.
when it's dark.
When it's dark
And
enough.
it's bright.
I would
brighter
often
than
just
moon
leave the satellite radio on in the house and,
Mhm.
you know, because of the HOA in Keller, I didn't really have on the roof type outside antennas, but, you know, just an Omni, you know, on the bookshelf, it would pick it up.
If you're an astronomy buff and actually use Star Walk or the latest Star Walk 2, they actually have all the satellites in it as well. So you can just point that up at the sky when you're looking at celestial objects and go, oh wait, there's a bird. You can tap in on it and at least see what satellite it is. It's not going to give you anything about tones or uplinks or downlink or anything like that, but at least let you know what's in the sky. And then depending how long that passes, you might have time to switch over to an app to figure out how to actually talk to it. But Star Walk is really good for that.
You can also do that by object base within Star Walk
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
So you can see it ahead of time when it's going to.
When it's going to come past. Yeah, there are a lot of, you know, borderline applications for other things that work when it comes to working with satellites. So, any other?
We've seen other stuff that go over that's not in that app.
Mhm.
We're looking at it and it's like
Yeah, what in Star Walk or in ISS?
an ISS
Yeah.
detector and it's up high.
Yeah.
But you
Star
can
Walk
go
even
down-
has all of the Starlink satellite clusters in it as well.
Wow.
Yeah, those are in there. I had them all selected, nothing
Yeah.
showed up.
You can't pick out a single satellite from the cluster, but you can at least figure out what that shiny, milky, amoeba-looking thing is that's crossing the sky. So, any other questions?
You find one particular kind of tripod is better than another.
For me, it's been what was free and available. No, I really haven't. I've seen operators use a regular cell phone tripod. I've seen them using the surveyor's tripods. It really depends on what you're wanting to do with it. Something that at least has 2 axes on it comes in handy. You know, be able to pitch and roll and twist for sure. If you're gonna go the tripod route. For me, especially when I was doing the dual HT, this is the way I went because it took all the weight. You know, both radios slapped on here.
Phones are kind of that,
And then, yeah,
kind of a counterweight.
yeah, I mean, well. You know, so for me, it was a lot easier to hold that additional weight by putting it on the tripod. But I did not have as much luck making it into the satellites either because I can't move as fast having it on the tripod as I could if I had it free-handed.
Yeah.
So, It's just kind of this is the evolution of things. This is where I was at. That's where I'm going with this. And when I go to the mobile, I will probably have the Yagi in hand versus being on the truck.
Is there like this dominant orbital pattern they send to satellites? Like, do they? Are there more in the ecliptic and elsewhere, for example?
Not really. It's not that I've seen anyway. Does anybody here have Ham Radio Deluxe? Ham Radio Deluxe has a whole satellite tracking app built into it as well. And if you have a mount, a rotor mount, I think it will even do elevation as well as azimuth motors. I know it'll do azimuth motor control. And HRD will also do, if you have a radio that is has cat control, it'll also do the frequency shifting for you automatically.
Do you know if anyone that's like right ascension declination supposed to help you out?
Can't think of anything. Nothing's coming to mind. Yeah, that would be another way to look at them now. Yeah, I don't know.
I have astronomy tripods.
Probably.
They would offer an advantage for satellites that are.
Oh yeah, they would. They would.
Then you're only.
I've seen some projects where they've taken the old astronomy tripods that have both built into them. I know somebody's done it with Celestron tripods. Actually, Celestron's the only one I can think of.
That's what I have.
Yeah.
I have right ascension declination, but they have a wide.
I seem to recall, I will look and see if I can find it, I'll send it to you. I seem to recall somebody did an open source project based upon those for being able to control them outside of the Celestron software. Yeah, that would definitely be a huge benefit. I mean, you're dialing in another object and you're tracking it. It's just not a typical orbital object. So, one of my other pastimes I haven't been so active in is I'm a state certified master naturalist as well. And when I was living out in Godley, I was with the Rio Brazos chapter out there. And every year I still go out there, they do a star party at the Active Nature Center. And it's a real kick when I'm out there. They're out there tracking, planets and objects and whatnot. I'm out there trying to make satellite contacts. It's a lot of interest. And both focuses kind of coincide. You're both dealing with orbital objects. So when I go and do that, I will typically have.
What date do they typically do that?
It depends. Some years it's in the spring, some years it's in the fall. It depends on when everybody's schedules line up. So.
Have they scheduled one this year?
There's not one scheduled yet. If you're interested, I'll let you know when one comes up. There are a lot of organizations right here that do star parties. Problem is, you have to be far enough out that you don't have the city wash. That's what kills us right here is we have way too much light wash here.
I think they have a weekend where they do that up at the state park.
Cleburne State Park does one. I think Mineral Wells does one.
One up north.
Glenrose does them.
Great places to not find a lot of streetlights sometimes.
Palo Duro does one or two a year, I think, of a Palo Duro Canyon. Fort Davis is the best. Fort Davis is the best. I did that last fall with my daughter and my other daughter. My daughter has a friend from school. They were born on the same day. My daughter's 3 hours older than Bella is. And ever since they found each other in first grade, she's been my third daughter. So I took Addison and Bella last year to Big Bend in November. We actually made it up to the observatory. And I've observed the stars out in West Texas. I've observed them at Fort Davis, which you're surrounded by mountains. There's no city wash whatsoever. But it's amazing what that extra thousand foot elevation will do for being at the base of the mountain where the observatory is to being at the top.
Yeah, much easier to see the ISS than.
Much easier to see all kinds of things at that point.
Satellites.
Tons of satellites. When I was a kid, my grandparents had property down in South Texas outside of Carrizo Springs. If anybody knows where that is. And when we were kids, we used to sit out on the trampoline 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was daylight because you could see so much out there. And now with all the oil and everything that's happened, it's like being here in the city. You can't see anything. But I was 4 or 5 years old laying on my back on a trampoline, and you could see tons of satellites. Just little low dots just streaking across the sky. So one thing I don't know if I covered or not is there's more diverse or more density, higher density of the linear birds than there are the FM birds. So it just, it depends on what you have equipment wise or what you want to spend. If you want to set up a satellite station and you have the funds to do it, I would go linear because that gives you the ability to do everything, both linear as well as the FM birds. But you can have a lot of fun just working the FM stuff too. It just depends on what you want to do with it. You want to sit at home in your shack and tell it to find everything for you and just have QSOs? Or do you want to be out, roving, trying to work one of those grid squares that nobody hardly ever activates? Do you want to be inside or outside? I prefer to do a lot of my radio work outside. I like being outside in as fresh of air as we consider we have around here versus being inside. And the other cool thing about working satellites is, if you're big into building things, you can build all kinds of antennas from this. There are lots of projects, Yagis, log periodics, helical, like what Greg mentioned. There are plans out there for making helicals for working satellites. So that's all I've got.
Good job. Repeat that, please.